It's great to be here at EO Alchemy. It's my first time I've been a speaker here and the first time I've gotten to be a participant. And I can look out now and say I'm among some friends that I've met and some of those parties that you've had. And it's been a great deal of fun. So now it's my turn to talk. And I want to ask you a couple questions. So could you name the 5 wealthiest people in the world? Could you name the last 5 people who were on the cover of Time magazine as People of the Year? Could you name the 5 latest Nobel or Pulitzer Prize winners? Chances are you might be able to name some of these people, but probably not all of these people. So let me ask you this. Could you name 2 or 3 people who really helped you through a tough time? Could you name 2 or 3 other EO members who've helped you support your business? Could you name 2 or 3 friends who've really made you feel appreciated? Chances are you could remember these people, and their names would come quickly to you. And why is this? This is because these people have had a big impact on your life. Now, each and every one of you out there is an entrepreneurial leader, or you wouldn't be here at EO Alchemy today. And each and every one of you has the possibility of being a significant person in the lives of others. You're one of those people. And by one of those people, what I mean is you're one of those people that can have a significant impact on other people's lives. So now I ask you this question. How would others in your organization rate your leadership? What would others in your organization say about you? And what I found in working with lots and lots of companies, and particularly entrepreneurial companies, is that entrepreneurs like you have a lot of courage. You have the courage to start a new company on maybe a shoestring budget. You have the courage to invest in or invent some new technology that's way ahead of its time. You may also have the courage to start new products and services that really change people's lives. But there's one thing I think that some entrepreneurs fail at. And what I think is that entrepreneurs fail at what I'm calling having leadership courage. So, you know, there's a guy named John Maxwell, maybe some of you have read his book. He wrote this book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And he talks about the law of the lid. And what he says is that every organization has a lid. And who do you think is the lid? You are. What he means by that is that the lid means that your company can only grow and be as successful as that lid. So if you rate yourself as an average leader, then you can expect to have an average organization. And your strengths, all of you out here, all of your strengths become the strengths of your organization. That's a good thing. But your weaknesses also become the weaknesses of your organization. So he says that organizations can't grow beyond this lid, but you can raise the level of your lid. And the way you can raise the level of your lid is to raise the way you lead. Raise your level of leadership. Now, here's what I think. I think you all know how to lead. I think everybody out here knows how to lead. And I think you know what you should do. And the reason I think you know what you should do is because you tell me. I've worked with lots of owners, and owners tell me what they should do. I should have never hired her. I should have stopped that practice a long time ago. I should have changed his role long before now. So to that, I tell you all, don't should on yourself. We all do it, but don't should on yourself. So what I want to talk to you right now about is what I call leadership courage. And I've always wanted to be a little bit like David Letterman. I know I don't look anything like him, don't sound like him, but I've always wanted to have a top 10 list. So we're going to have a top 10 list. We're going to build it as we go here about the top 10 ways you can have leadership courage, what it is, and how to know when you've got it. And I'm going to start by telling you a couple stories. And just know the names have been changed not to protect the innocent, but to protect the guilty. So let me tell you a little story about a guy we'll call Jerry. Jerry owned a construction company, rather large company in California. And he invited me and some of my colleagues to come in and help him with his leadership and his leadership team. And so first time I met Jerry, I thought, this is a gem of a guy. What a guy. And geez, everyone here seems to love working for him. They seem so loyal to Jerry. You know, what's up? What does he need me for? So as I got into the organization and I really got to know what was going on, I kind of figured something was wrong with the picture. And here's what was wrong with the picture. Jerry was kind of king of the kingdom. And is this familiar to any of you? He was what might be called a benevolent dictator. If you drew his organizational chart, it should have been drawn like a big wagon wheel with him at the center and all of his people as spokes coming out. And sure, he had a lot of loyal people, but he did not have a leadership team. In fact, if he had operational managers by my standards and probably other people's standards, they were underperformers and they shouldn't have even been there. They were people who didn't communicate with each other, but only wanted to communicate with Jerry, and if they did communicate with each other, it was to be competitive so that they could get more resources for their agenda, for what they wanted to do. And so maybe they were loyal to Jerry, but they were bad for his company. The other thing here about Jerry is Jerry made all the decisions. You know, he was working night and day because he was figuring out where people were parking in the parking lot, as well as the $2 or $3 million deals that he had coming down. So I think Jerry was starting to get the law of the lid, and when he invited us in, that he needed to do some changing about the leaders in his organization, and he needed to make things different. But then something really bad happened, and I hope this never happens to any of you. He was 52 years old, and he had a terrible stroke. And he was incapacitated and could no longer manage his company or no longer run his company. So what do you think happened next? He's in the hospital, incapacitated. His family, who also looks out and says, nobody to lead. There's nobody to lead here. They bring in another family member who has some background in business, but no background in construction. Mind you, this is a company that built universities, churches, beautiful structures throughout California. 55-year-old company, 14 months later, what happens? I think somebody in the front row got it. It failed. Failing company. Now, some of you can say, well, a lot of construction companies went out. This was a bad time, bad recession, things were going on. I could say, yeah, but it didn't have to happen to this company. They had enough going on. So what are the lessons we can put on our top 10 list about leadership courage? What does it take courage to do? It takes courage to let go and let other people lead. Oh, I guess maybe I missed one here. I want to go back here and start over again. It takes courage to develop other leaders. Number one, it takes courage to let go and then let them lead. And number three, okay, go here. And as the story of Jerry illustrated, sometimes we got to just do it. We can't put it off forever. If you're sitting there and thinking about a team that you need, that your leaders aren't quite what they need to be, now's the time to work on it. Not don't live in the land of someday I'll. Some of you like to hang out there, someday I'll. But this is the time to just do it. So let me add on to this with another story. I worked with another company, and this company also a family-owned company. This company, though, they did something I totally admired. Sometimes I go in companies and I ask them questions and I ask, well, what are your values? What are your principles? And I have people tell me things like, oh, well, those are listed in the lunchroom. You can see a list of my principles on the wall in the lunchroom. But, it really takes a special company to live your values. So I started working with this company where they are one of the companies that really has a set of business principles that they started with when they were two guys in a garage. And that's how they built their culture. And they were really intentional about building a culture that's based on their values. And so therefore, they were pretty good about hiring people who fit their values. And you know that whole expression about getting people on the bus and getting people off the bus that Jim Collins writes about in his book, Good to Great? Well, they pretty much got the right people on their bus. But every once in a while, there'd be somebody that didn't quite fit their values. And so they hired this guy, we'll call him Tom. And maybe you'll understand here what Tom's like. You might have had some experience with Tom in your life. But so Tom comes in, he's a VP of sales. And Tom comes in and he just knocks the socks off of sales. He just produces. 3 months he's there, he produces. But he leaves body bags while he's producing. And you know what I mean by body bags? Nobody wants to work with this guy because he's undercut the morale. They don't trust him. And so sooner or later, the sales organization's kind of in an upheaval, even though this guy is a top producer. And so what happens here is in some companies who have a Tom, there's a dilemma. Well, hey, he's really producing, but hey, you know, look what he's doing to the morale of our company, and look what he's doing here. This is not the value scheme that we want our people aligned with. But unfortunately, some people, you know, they think it's better to get the production, and who cares about our culture? Not this company. This company, the owners were swift and decisive. They went into Tom, and they said, Tom, look, you've got 3 months. You need to clean this up. You need to change the way you manage, change the way you lead, change the way you communicate, and then you can stay and work for us. And if you can't do that, then you can't stay and work for us. That takes a lot of courage, don't you think? That takes a lot of courage to stand up for your values that way, even when, especially in a down economy, when this guy's really producing for you. Well, meanwhile, Jerry, what kind of ego do you think Jerry had? He had a pretty big ego. So Jerry, I've got my names are confused. My invented names here. Anyway, Tom. So Tom, they bring me in to coach Tom. And I come in, this is truthfully one of the few cases in my career where I came in and I went, you know, I'm not quite so sure about this. This guy has a really big ego, and you know, I don't think he thinks he's doing anything wrong. So I come in, I start working with Tom, and Tom, at first he's like, you know, hey, this is how I've always done it. You know, I'm good at this. I don't see what the problem is. And then as he began to see how people viewed him, it was time for him to step up and have some courage. Because he had, quote, what I call a winning formula. He'd been going through companies, producing for them until something happened and they didn't like how he was being and they got rid of him. So this time he said, you know, I like this company, I like these people, I'm gonna learn from this. And that was a very humbling thing for a person like Tom. How many of you have a Tom and you know Toms? Anybody of you have a Tom like this? So a really good lesson for these, you know, for us to take a look at, and for us to look at, well, what can we add to our list based on this story? Number 4, be intentional about building your culture based on your values and principles. All right, there we go. Nope, must be pressing this wrong. Number 5, model the way. And that's what, you know, we were talking about this morning with Dandapani. What we were talking about this morning with Dandapani is, you know, if you as leaders model the way, you're going to get other people to follow you. And I always call it like Dwizzywid. Anyone know what that stands for? Do what you say you will do. Dwizzywid. It works all the time. It's a really simple principle, but we don't always practice it that way. So live your principles and values by modeling them. And don't accept mediocrity. Can we put that back up? Don't accept mediocrity in any shape or form. And we can have mediocrity of behavior, we can have mediocrity of performance, and when we condone it, we are condemning our organizations to be mediocre. When we allow people to do half their jobs, perform at half what's possible, then we just allow ourselves to have a culture of mediocrity. So I encourage you to think about those 6 things. And now, while I think about how we can add on to this, often I'm asked to come into companies to take a look inside, see what people are thinking and feeling. And so I do some communication, some interviewing, I do some surveys sometimes. And what do you think is the top thing that comes out of these surveys that your employees and people you work with want more of? Any guesses? Anybody? Communication, always. 90% of these surveys or interviews that I do, what happens is people say they want more communication. And here you all of you entrepreneurs, what I'm amazed at is the fervor in which you go after the things you go after, but how much entrepreneurs can run away from communication. I sometimes, no offense or anything, and it's not just you, this is like everywhere. It's like the great avoiders. So I always tell people, pay now or pay later. If things that start out like a drop of water as an issue in your company are going to become an oil spill unless they're tended to. And why is that? It's because people in your company, if you don't communicate with them, what are they going to do? Any guesses on that one?
They'll make it up.
Exactly. They're going to make it up. And what are they going to make up? Is it going to be better than what you would normally tell them? No, it's going to be worse, 10 times worse than what you would need to tell them about in your communication with them. So, it takes courage to make communication a priority, not just, push it off to the side for when you have time for it, but make it a priority and actually have it be a part of your culture. So that's number 7 on our list of top 10 that we're building. Make communication a priority. I want to say a little bit more about communication. Sometimes I do these leadership retreats. I love doing them. I think it's great. We design, facilitate. People get so inspired by this. They just, all of the people that come to these leadership retreats, if you invite sometimes we even invite more people in than the leadership team to these kinds of things, and it has the potential for really inspiring the whole organization. But it also has the potential for causing some major frustration. And what do you think causes the frustration? Any ideas on that? What causes the frustration is a lack of follow-up. Is the fact that we set up great, we have great ideas, we make great action plans, and then these leadership retreats turn into an event. And yet we've publicized them around our organizations, and people are waiting to see, oh my goodness, we're going to really do this. We've got some new ideas. We're going to be implementing new things. And their expectations are raised. So unless we can create a communication process that creates accountability, by the way, that's the second most wished for thing that comes out on the surveys. Believe it or not, your employees and your other leaders, they want accountability. And it's not always there, and it's not always easy. So it's important for you to use your communication to create a culture of accountability. I'm trying to get to number 8 here. There we go. Use communication as a foundation for accountability. So we've talked about communication, and we've talked about it as a foundation of accountability. And the last thing I want to say about the whole communication thing is, you all have a vision. You started your companies with a vision. I'm assuming you all did. But it's not enough for you to have the vision. It's important for everyone in your organization to have that vision. And that vision doesn't just happen. You can't engage others in your organization around a vision unless it's intentional. So that's also part of the communication process. communicating and sharing your vision. Communicating and sharing your vision. And so we've got 9 points here. Finally, I've got 9 top 10 points here. The number 10 point is one you've already heard today. And I didn't plan it this way, but number 10 is practice. And you know, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers. He said it takes 10,000 hours of practice to master any craft. And after hearing Nandapani today, I can say that, you know, we can't just talk about being leaders. We need to practice being a leader, and it needs to be part of the fabric of everything you do. And everything you do all day long, you should be thinking about, what is it like? What kind of a leader am I being today? So I encourage you to start practicing, and start practicing now. And I want to thank you for being with you today, and invite you to come to my workshop this afternoon on building a winning leadership team, because it's an excellent way for you to practice being a leader. Thank you.